Hello and welcome to this Electric Night. I'm Marieta Evans and I'm delighted to be co-presenting this evening with a fabulous Inside Electric team. Inside Electric is one of the most popular websites covering the rapid growth of electric motorsports, and they are Rob Watts, Hazel Southwell and Katie Thurman. Thank you very much, guys, for joining me on this little adventure tonight.
It's our pleasure.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
And also with us tonight is Moto E rider Bradley Smith and Formula E driver Alexander Sims, who will be joining us in just a few minutes. So, Bradley, thank you for being with us this evening.
Thanks for having me.
It's very difficult to explain what you are doing because actually you're doing a bit of everything at the moment. And I'm going to make that my first question because last year you became a Moto E rider and you became a factory test rider for Aprilia in MotoGP. So how was it having to deal with adapting to a new manufacturer in MotoGP and at the same time adapting to a completely new technology, riding an electric bike?
Yeah, as you can imagine, it was pretty nuts because fortunately, I came from a lot of background of different motorcycles and different racing. I did a little bit of endurance when I was doing MotoGP as well. And then through the ranks inside of 125s on 2 strokes, then Moto2 4 strokes, and then finally MotoGP. Different manufacturers there, but last year was definitely a head scratcher for me because I would jump off of a MotoGP bike sometimes only a couple of days prior, and then jump on a Moto E and then race all weekend and then jump on a MotoGP bike on a test on Monday. So I was scratching my head a few times, but it was definitely fun, and I learned a lot in the meantime.
What do you find more different about riding an electric bike, about riding the Energica electric bike?
To be honest, the biggest thing for me in the beginning was not having a gearbox. And that was literally just pulling out of pit lane. I was so used to using the pit limiter and then just changing gear to first or second and then going through the gearbox. But I think that was the hardest thing to get used to. Obviously, the weight is something as well that everybody says. Lack of noise didn't really mean anything because it still has like a whir and you still have the throttle connection anyway. So I could quite easily understand that. The engine braking took a little bit of getting used to because you're not used to hearing the tires screech into the corner. But actually, when we lock the rear into the corner, you get quite a loud screech from the tires. So, and then also our knee sliders or elbow sliders, when we're in the middle of the corner, sometimes you would go and then you could just hear and then you didn't know if that was the bike touching or if it was your knee slider. So those little different bits and pieces, racing as well, because you wouldn't get the noise of another bike coming alongside you. You know, the guys would just appear from nowhere or suddenly at the last minute would come into your vision. So all those different things took a little bit of getting used to, but once 1 or 2 races are going, you're into the swing of things.
Katie, Hazel, your first questions for Bradley.
A lot of what people talk about with the difference between a combustion and an electric bike is the weight. How difficult was it to adapt to? Because I know it is heavier than even a MotoGP bike. Yeah,
MotoGP I think is now up to 160 with the bike, and we were running around 265 with the Energica project. So obviously quite a bit different. But in all honesty, if you match your suspension or you match your technical equipment to adapt to that, then in the end you don't feel it as much. The problem that we come against last year was because it was in its first season. We put some front forks on the bike that was generally low cost, and then we had a big problem in terms of trying to get that stopped and into the corner. This season they've come up with a couple of different ideas in terms of front fork springs and compression settings, and to be honest, now they're matching more with the weight. I don't feel it anywhere near as much as I did last season.
How have you found the fan interaction with Moto E? Because similar to when Formula E started, quite a lot of fans were used to having, these heavy combustion engines cars, and then switching to electric, it felt almost like a betrayal of what motorsport should be. How have you found the same with Moto E?
I think actually at the racetrack, it's missing something. I don't know if it's the noise to capture the audience or what it is, but they're live at the racetrack. It's definitely missing something. But on the TV, people love it. From the word go, from the first races, because there's not so many laps. So we're only racing for probably about 10 to 14 minutes max, depending on the track. It's just a great little warm up to the Sunday. You imagine people sit down, they've just finished MotoGP warm up. They're probably finishing their cereals, and then suddenly we just come on, and the bikes are just so similar, going back and forward with one another. Commentators really get into it, and because it was so new, it created some great racing. So we actually, fans they love it at the circuit. There's still some question marks, but definitely at home from the sofa, people are like definitely thumbs up.
Bradley, last year you finished second in the standings, and this year you are one of the favorites for the Moto E World Cup title. Obviously, you must be looking forward to go back racing. With the COVID-19 situation, what is the latest for Moto E? Is it restarting again in July at Jerez like MotoGP? What do you know?
Yeah, so by the sounds of it, Carmelo Espeleta is the boss of Dorna. He's really keen for Moto E to continue, was very happy with the success of the first season. So although logistically we're probably another headache for them, they still see the worth in us racing and being there for 5 rounds this season. So we have to wait first for the calendar to come out, and then secondly, which ones we'll be able to do. But we're still waiting, I think, like everybody else, but July the 19th seems to be knocking around as a date. Whether we'll be there or not, we'll see. But that was definitely the first planned race anyway, was going to be Jerez, so fingers crossed they'll have us there.
And do you see yourself as one of the favorites for the title this season, or when racing resumes?
I have to, in all honesty. Last season just didn't go to plan in Misano, got wiped out in the first race and a technical problem in the second race. Otherwise, if we take those ones out, I was there. So no fault of my own, but also no excuses. It's racing. I like the silver medal. It looks pretty, but gold looks much better, I'm told. So we're going for that.
Hazel or Katie, another question for him?
You work with Aprilia on developing the MotoGP bike, but also last season was a huge developmental step for the Moto E bike, and you were working out how to race it. You were working with the teams and the manufacturer to kind of develop that. How comparatively different is the types of development possible with the MotoGP bike versus the Moto E bike? Like what kind of things would you be looking at comparatively?
Oh, wow. MotoGP is just one of those endless things where you can change absolutely everything, build everything from scratch. And obviously that also is allowed inside of with Energica and with the Moto E project. But the thing is at the moment we're trying to get the championship up and running. It's a single make series. Everyone needs to have the same bike. So we're very restrictive in terms of what we were able to do and what we weren't allowed to do. The nice thing is I have a chance to speak to Giampiero, who is the kind of project leader for the Energica project, and throw in some ideas behind the scenes in terms of, a couple of things, and also pick his brains in terms of electric engines and whether it would be beneficial to run with a gearbox or not, or 2 engines or 2 motors, what the new battery technology is kind of showing, and whether that will be available to us. And then also Formula E as well, looking towards them and what they're doing, and see if there's anything that we can take from that to motorcycles. But space and weight is a limiting factor for us. 260 kilos seems heavy for us inside of the motorcycle world, but I'm sure for Alex, 260 kilos, nothing.
I can see Alexander Sims has now joined us. Thank you very much for being with us tonight, Alexander.
No worries, guys. Nice.
I'm aware that you have to leave before 9 because you have a date with your fans on Twitch. Before I ask you the first question, you and Bradley Smith, you're both British, you both competing in electric motorsports. Have you met before? Did you know each other? Had you spoken before tonight?
No, we haven't. First for me. How are you doing, Bradley?
Very well, very well. I've watched from afar from the TV, but that's as far as I've seen you.
Awesome. You got a problem with distance in your living room or something, or?
Yeah.
From afar.
A little bit.
No, sorry. Sorry. Yes, you watched. Sorry, got you.
Yeah.
It meant you sat far away from the TV.
No. Well, maybe with COVID we have to keep that social distance.
Exactly.
So, Alexander, I'm going to ask the first question before I pass you to the Inside Electric team. And I read on Twitter that you have written a blog, and the headline was Formula E is the most difficult formula in motorsports. Could you try to explain and summarize why?
Yeah, we might be here a while, so I'll try and definitely summarize. But I mean, just in terms of the motorsport that I've been involved in, obviously I haven't been in Formula One, so that's obviously the pinnacle in four-wheel racing on tracks, which, you know, it's probably another world compared to what I'm used to. But from what I've done in all sorts of GT racing, single-seaters on a slightly more junior level, Formula 3, Formula 2 testing. Yeah, going to Formula E, it's just so complex. The differences really are in every single aspect of what you do as your daily job, what you do in terms of analyzing your performance, where you need to dedicate a lot of focus to find lap time. I mean, the fundamentals are very different to most motorsport series, that all the races are on street tracks. It's on a treaded all-weather tire, which is, again, unique to high-level motorsport. That has very different characteristics. It's electric, which in itself actually is probably not one of the most biggest differences, because when you're in the car, you just use the throttle and brake. And if you were driving flat out, it wouldn't pose such a challenge. But then there's the rule in Formula E, we start the race with not enough energy to go flat out for every lap, on purpose to promote efficiency drives in the engineering side of things, and to open up energy management strategy. And so they're the very basic fundamentals, I would say, about it. And when you come into Formula E, everything's completely new, and you have such limited amount of track time on each race weekend because it's just a single day event, that your hour and 15 minutes that you get before qualifying on a track that starts off dusty and starts gripping up, it's an ever-changing target that you've got to go out and then nail your single lap in qualifying at higher power than you've done the most of your practice laps. So yeah, that's it in a very broad nutshell. But it's, yeah, each single item that I mentioned, you can spend days learning about it to then go to the track and then find another little bit that you need to explore, which, yeah, just takes time.
Inside Electric, your questions for Alexander.
I'll take the first one. Alex, hope you're well. So I guess the only track action you're getting at the moment is in the digital format. We've seen a few races now in the Formula E Race at Home Challenge. How are you finding that, adapting to that form of racing, and is there any kind of comparison to the sort of simulator that you would use in preparation for driving the real car?
Well, yeah. First of all, in terms of my adaptation to the racing, it's definitely still in progress. I'm not particularly hopeful of fully adapting by the end of this series, but I keep trying and keep learning. My experience on simulators, I mean, it's not that bad. I've driven simulators for quite a few years on and off at times, but I've never been good on them. I've never been fast. I can get to a point where I'm consistent, but even that is a struggle. But to then do a fast lap time, I just don't understand how other drivers feel the grip potential on a simulator. I can't feel it. And so, yeah, not particularly hopeful that I'll be up the front at any of these races. But in terms of the hardware that we've got, I mean, it's a really nice piece of kit. I've got to be honest, what Formula E have sent out to the drivers that didn't have simulators to enable us to do these race at home events is a lovely all-in-one piece of kit, but it is still a package that you can have delivered to your house and set up pretty quickly. So the stuff that we have in Munich for BMW anyway, I can't speak for the other teams, but the big initial difference is the visuals. I'm using it's a perfectly nice large screen, but in Munich we have like a full wraparound screen so that your entire peripheral vision is made up of the racetrack. So you do feel like you're fully immersed in it. Then you're sat in a cockpit in the real thing in Munich, which is a Formula E cockpit as such, with exactly the same steering wheel, so your same pedal makeup, which does help to make it a little bit more lifelike. But it's still, I don't want to say, I guess limited by the reality that you're in a simulator, and the physics of making the car handle correctly on track are never going to tie up with what your brain's telling you, because you're not moving and you're not feeling the G-forces, and you don't feel the car moving around, the tires squirming underneath you, which you obviously do in real life. So there's a lot that has been done to make it as lifelike as possible, but I mean, you're never going to replicate things. So it's quite important from a simulator program development point of view, I think, to understand fundamentally what you can do well and what you can't, and those things that you can't replicate, actually just don't try to replicate them at all. Ignore them entirely and just focus on what you can do well.
That's interesting. Your teammate though seems to be doing quite well. Have you asked him for any tips?
Yes. Well, yeah, Max. Yeah, he's been phenomenal so far. But that translates totally over to when we're in Munich preparing for races. He's like a second and a half quicker than me every single time, and it's utterly demoralizing. It was the same last year with Antonio. I maybe was a little bit closer sometimes with Antonio, but I was never within half a second of him anyway. So I've got quite used to not being very, very fast and just getting on with the program. My lowest point, bizarrely, last year was before New York, where I could not string a race run together without spinning, like, honestly 5 times was the best that I did. And then I went there and put it on pole and got a podium. So after that, I kind of fully relaxed and said, you know what, it's really not that critical how fast I am on the simulator.
That sums it up perfectly. Do we need to go in the simulator?
Well, no, I mean, to be fair, in my GT racing that I've done, Bradley, previously, I tried the simulator once to learn the circuit, Sebring, and I got there and I had to relearn the track. I don't know why. The simulator that I went on, it just didn't tie up with what I was expecting to feel. And then for the rest of the American series that I was doing in IMSA, I didn't go to the simulator once, to be honest. And in an open track environment where it doesn't really matter if you put a wheel on the grass or something, yeah, you can get away with it and crack on, I was fine. But in Formula E, with walls everywhere, bumpy street tracks and no track time, basically, and so many processes actually to learn in terms of you transferring information to your engineers back and forth, it's pretty crucial, actually. But yeah, I did enjoy the days when I didn't have to do the simulator driving.
Hey, so look, Katie, have you got any question for Alex?
I was just going to ask, Alex, you've been spending time at home recently, obviously, like all of us. You have been I think you've been adapting your house or home to be more eco-friendly over the past sort of like however many years you've been there. I was just wondering what kind of projects have you been doing?
Yes, I mean, if we wind back a couple of years, I had very grand plans for a barn conversion that I was planning to do. that has unfortunately fallen through because it just took longer and longer and longer than we expected with the planners. So we actually moved into a new house. New for us, it's an older home, but moved somewhere in January. And I'm in the process of working out what I can do to it. I've changed all the lights. I think we had like 64 down lights, which I did all myself and transferred them over to LEDs, which was the full socket and everything, rewired the whole thing. So that was a bit time intensive, but beyond that, I'm just at the moment working out what solar panels and heat pumps and things I can get in the house.
Bradley and Alexander, have you got any piece of advice that would you like to share with each other, or have you got any question for each other? Like both of you, British, both of you competing in a fairly new electric series. In your experience, anything you would like to share, ask each other?
Yeah, I mean, I was nitpicking on a few things with a couple of other drivers, but we're quite limited to what we can do. But definitely the cooling, any type of cooling strategies, or definitely kind of how to start the race with the lowest battery temp. That was always something that we were trying to do, because if you imagine we start the race, everyone starts more or less the same, on charge, off charge, and then everyone starts with 100%. And basically we race flat out until for about 7 laps. So any type of motor temp that you could decrease, or any battery temp that we could decrease, would massively give us, I don't know if it could give us 2-3 Ks down the straight, but that's kind of what we lose per lap at the moment. So any ideas would be greatly appreciated.
Well, I guess you guys don't use regen, do you?
No.
Well, you have no negative torque? Minimal.
We have very minimal, yes.
Yeah, sure. That would be the first thing I'd suggest. But
lightest one possible, almost like rolling off a little bit, right?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm not an engineer. I'm not. Your guys will know far more about it, but I mean, we have a lot of help from the engineers to give us a set of beeps and things. So we have full coasting strategies and regen strategies, where we get a beep in our ear to tell us at what point on each straight to coast and regen. Motor temp for us is I don't think ever a problem. It's not always battery temperature. And that's because every single race we're going, I don't know, do you go through to 0% state of charge, or is it just a set amount of laps that the organizers know the bikes can do?
We pretty much go to 30% battery, and then at 30% we lose like 3 seconds a lap.
Yes. So I mean, I guess you'd have to work out the pros and cons of coasting for small amounts per straight at top speed to save motor temp and things, to then how long that extends your full power or whatever. But I mean, riding flat out, I mean, you're always going to be up against it, aren't you? I have electric road cars, and whilst staying within speed limits of roads, definitely have experienced similar things with electric motor temperatures just rising and rising, because they're not like quite as tuned up as the Formula E ones in terms of heat dissipation. But it's a horrible feeling when you know that the motor's getting up to temp, getting higher and higher and higher, and there's not much you can do. So I guess you guys have it all the time. Tough.
One quick question for Alex before he leaves us is from a fan who is watching us on Facebook, and he wants to know what's your favorite Formula E circuit and your favorite Formula One circuit.
I haven't driven most of the F1 circuits, to be fair. So I'd probably go for the safe bet and say Silverstone. Just because the high speed corners there in a Formula One car. It's the only place I have driven an F1 car, actually, and it was pretty mad. So, yeah, I loved that, and I think all the other drivers seem to say that it's pretty good as well. In terms of Formula E, I would... again, it's pretty tough. I mean, Rome was pretty good fun, but I was horribly uncompetitive there, so I don't have fantastic memories. I don't know. I would possibly actually go for Berlin Tempelhof, because it was really, really bumpy and really tough, but really open and encouraged a lot of good racing. So that was really good fun. I would say that.
Thank you very much, Alexander. Thank you very much. I know you have to go now to Twitch.
I don't know who said this quite so strictly. I wasn't quite aware of this very strict time frame. Sorry, but
I was being told.
I'm no prima donna. I don't have.
I was being told you had to leave us because you had another engagement. But I want to thank you so very much for being with us tonight, and good luck with the next Race at Home challenge.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Nice
to meet you online, Bradley. All the best.
Yeah.
See you guys.
Bye.
So, Bradley, back to you. I have another question for you, and that is that I think you all left the Moto E test in Jerez in March very, very happy with the new Moto E bike. Lap times were already 1.5 seconds faster than 2019. So could you tell us more about what has changed and what has improved for season 2 of Moto E?
Yeah, I think all riders left that test going, I hope that the racing's not going to be this competitive, because honestly, the risks that everyone was taking, and it, as always, you have to have a look at our championship. It's like half older riders. I don't want to say old, but I'm older. Like, we're at the ending of our careers, and you've got some of the young ones coming through. So you've got some guys nearly pushing 30 or early 30s, and then you've got some young guys early 20s. And I don't know where they get this need to risk so much when it comes to testing, but those guys kept on throwing down some lap times. So everyone left the test happy, fortunately, in one piece, because I didn't think that was going to be the case, because everyone just kept going faster and faster. But yeah, we've got some new tires this year from Michelin, better construction. So again, down to this weight thing of 265 kilos, we needed a construction of the tire that just better suited it. Last year we had tremendous grip, but sometimes we'd actually bottom out the tire, hit the rim, and then it would actually end up flicking us out the seat and normally arse over tit onto the racetrack, which isn't ideal. And then, like I said, with the suspension, we have a better compression setting that, looks after the dive of the front fork, so we can brake a little bit harder. I think we've got better torque, so a little bit different map. Honestly, I couldn't feel that much, but all of these things all together in the experience of a season and 12 months under our belt was 1.5 seconds. And I think that will stay. I don't know how much it will go faster if we were to go back there and race, because the temperatures are rising. And if we're racing in June, July, the performance of the bikes will be a little bit down. Mm-hmm. But yeah, definitely a second faster this season, and closer than ever. I think we had 8 or 9 guys within 0.2, 0.3 of each other. So I'm looking forward to the championship. And
longer battery life as well?
That's wishful thinking. I think that's PR rather than reality. We would wish that we could get maybe one extra lap, but as I said, especially when we're going to be racing in summer and these temperatures, I think anything that they've improved on battery life or with cooling, we're going to lose in the temperatures of the batteries.
As a rider, how much fun is it to ride in Moto E? Because all of you are obviously on identical bikes, which means it's very competitive, as you said, very close. But it's so exciting. It's like a Moto 3 or a Red Bull Rookies Cup race.
To be honest, I've missed it, because basically there's no excuses. You actually turn up as a racer and you're given a competitive package, and it's he who can race it the best wins. And it's just a nice feeling to line up and know that talent is shining through in that championship, and not who's got the biggest budgets behind the scene, who's spending the most amount of money, resources, engineers, all that type of stuff, which is fantastic. And we see that inside MotoGP. Dawn has done a great job in reducing the impact of a factory team over a satellite team, but still the factory guys are the guys that are supposed to win, and they invest the money, so that happens. But Moto E's a breath, of fresh air, and that it's not he who brings the best guys, is going to win, or the biggest budgets. It's the best rider. So it's nice.
Hazel, Katie, have you got any other questions for Bradley?
I was just going to ask, Alexander spoke about it briefly, his favourite Formula E tracks and stuff like that. Did you have any favourite circuits from last year in Moto E that you really enjoyed and can't wait to go back to?
Honestly, Valencia. It's one of the tight and twisty tracks for us, because we don't have that much power, are the best tracks. Any type of ones that have a bunch of corners and that makes it interesting for us. Unfortunately, we raced in Red Bull Ring last year, and it's boring. It's difficult to get 260 kilos stopped into those hard braking. Whereas we run down into turn 4, down the hill into there, that was scary every lap, especially when it rained. We had no wet practice, no nothing, and it was out for a 5-lap race, and we had to all learn wet tires in 5 laps and try and race each other. So that was definitely interesting. But Valencia definitely stood out. Last race of the season, 100,000 people turning up there. That football stadium atmosphere of like all the spectators around the outside, it's always a special one.
Yeah, well, we go there for Formula E testing, which obviously it's not designed for Formula E testing. It's designed for MotoGP. But I think I can speak for all of us when I say that I'd love to go there for a MotoGP weekend. It looks like it would just be insane. The atmosphere would be wicked.
It is.
It made me laugh. I was watching some of the Formula E testing, and I asked the guys, I said, do you not realise where track limits are? Because I would watch some onboard stuff.
There's no such thing.
I'm like, they're just doing whatever lines that they want, because it was like into turn 1, just blow everything like completely off the track, go super wide into turn 2. I'm like, okay, these guys have got their own programs going on.
The only track limit when we're there for Formula E is there's a false chicane that they install on the long sort of straight
down the start straight,
yeah. So
which they all moan about.
Get your lap time cancelled is if
races. I'm sorry.
I actually have a question, if that's okay. I'm not much of a two-wheel expert, I will admit, Bradley, but one thing that interests me about Moto E, it's fairly new. I think it's only 2 years now since launch.
This is we're going into season 2. Yeah.
Okay, so it's not quite been 2 years yet, but we've seen already now we're 6 years on from Formula E having launched, and the championship is pretty much unrecognizable now from when you go back to that first season. What do you anticipate Moto E will look like in 5 or 10 years time, and how motorcycle racing might shape how that's going to look?
A lot of questions, to be honest, about electric racing, and when do I think that will be implemented into MotoGP? And my honest gut instinct right now is we're going to find a cleaner combustion. We're going to find a way of burning whatever it is, but I don't believe it's electric. I don't think electric will be the future of MotoGP. I think that these guys will come up with, let's say, hydrogen, for example, and they'll find some algorithms and some, scientific ideas in terms of making that power. And I honestly believe that that's more the future for us than anything else. I don't even think we'll see hybrids. I don't even think we'll see, maybe electric assisted, like a KERS system from before, something like that. I think it will just be when they decide to knock it on the head with a combustion, gasoline engine, they'll just figure out a way to do something else. I think electric at the moment for us in motorcycles is a green way for a couple of years, and they're going to kind of see how it evolves. But my gut instinct is this will be around for maybe 5 to 8 years, and then something will change in the future after that.
Can I just quickly ask what your opinions are on just the bike industry, like in general, whether you think that will ever go fully electric? Obviously, with cars and stuff like that, there seems to be much more interest in hybrid and or electric cars on the road. But do you see that happening with bikes, or do you think with bikes, people love it for the noise it makes and the feel it is when you ride them?
Well, I think our market's so niche. Everyone has a car inside the UK. I think bike is like less than 1%. And even in Europe, when we see markets such as Spain and Italy, in terms of global marketing strategies from motorcycle manufacturers, Europe's not even a market. They're there for advertising because that's where the Westerner is. But it's not a market in terms of sales. So I really don't see the push from the motorcycle side. I think that we have, as I said, a niche market with a lot of die-hard grease monkeys that love motorcycles that make noise. And that's where it will stay for quite a long time. And like I said, I believe that electric was something that the car industry needed to do to fill a gap and make sure that they didn't miss a market. But I think something else will come in the next decade.
Amazing. Thank you.
I do have some final questions for Bradley, more about MotoGP. One thing I have been thinking today about when I was remembering all the interviews you and I have done in the past, I remember very clearly, Bradley, in 2009, you were fighting for the 125 title. Then your first season in MotoGP, you finished 10th. In 2015, you finished 6th, which is quite an achievement when you are in a satellite team. And many, many, many Sundays, you have managed to beat very big names nowadays on the MotoGP grid. So my question is, looking back, how are you feeling with how your career in the Premier class panned out? Do you feel you were given the opportunities that you deserved?
That's a tricky one, always going to be to answer. But I mean, I sit here and I certainly don't feel that the last dice is rolled. Difficult circumstances with my current teammate Andrea Iannone, who's going through his doping allegations at the moment, and his trials are still ongoing. So there's a chance that I might get a factory seat if this season actually gets going. So, but if we look at it as it has been, I'm very proud of what I was able to achieve. Like you said, I got to 5th in the world, 6th in the world, and on a satellite junior program, I was waiting for a factory seat, and I believe that it should have come, but whether it was the wrong year at the wrong time or I didn't fit the profile at that moment. But I jumped at the chance to jump onto KTM. That was definitely an interesting 2 years that I learned a lot. Bringing a brand new manufacturer into a championship and basically leaving it 2 years later with a bike that was capable of finishing inside the top 10. I think that both myself and my teammate Paul Espargaro did a great job. He did a great job also last season. I think he had the best result of a 6th. So seeing that the guy that they replaced me with didn't do anything like I did, bailed out of his contract after 10 races or something because it was too hard for him. I don't know. It certainly didn't make for easy watching. But I think that everyone saw it, everyone noted it, and should my opportunity come in 2020 to be back there, I'm going to take it with both hands.
Have you got any more questions for Bradley, Rob, Hazel, or Katie?
Yeah, I think we're good. Thank you.
Just before you go, Bradley, 3 years ago today, we lost Nicky, Hayden. You both spent a lot of time with him in the paddock. Have you got any special memory of him that you would like to share with us tonight and with people who will be watching this later?
Yeah, obviously, Nicky's a tremendous individual. And I don't know, 3 years has flown by, but gone so slowly at the same time. So I was teammates with Nicky my very first season that I was involved inside of MotoGP. I came in as a 15-year-old into the Repsol Honda team, and he that year was a MotoGP rider, and funny enough, world champion. But middle of that season, I just remember I was lost. A lot of Spanish, a lot of Italians around, not many English speakers. And he just pulled me to one side and just said, listen, my brother comes with me, my trainer, Alden, my dad's here sometimes. You need anything, you just, swing by the motorhome and you're always welcome. Or you want to sit with dinner and talk with us, you're always welcome. And that one will always stay by me, especially as a newbie inside the championship. I think everyone still remembers the emotions of his dad, Earl, stood there on pit lane, praying to the sky, for his son to make it through the last, few laps there. And then Nicky's emotions as well, having won that championship. It's those type of memories. I think that we always try to remember. I remember also watching the rain race back from Sepang when he won his first World Superbike race as well, with Honda there. And I only watched that last week. So there's so many memories. We've been on bicycle rides together out in Misano as well, around the hills there. Been to Valentino's dirt truck ranch together at the same time, watching him do amazing things around there. I remember watching him around the Indy mile, doing his demonstration as the Marshal of Honor. So there's it's endless with that guy, and I miss him dearly.
We all miss him. Thank you very much for helping us remember him today, Bradley. And thank you very much for being our first ever guest for our first ever electric night. I'm aware that you are an hour ahead of us, so we're going to let you go. But thank you so very much for being with us this evening, Bradley.
You're more than welcome. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Bradley.
All right. Take care. All right, guys.
Bye. And Hazel and Rob and Katie, I would like to stay a bit longer with you to talk about Inside Electric, because it has become very quick a very popular website. You are producing very high quality content. Your Twitter account is amazing, is very active, very engaging. How was Inside Electric born, and how did you guys get involved in covering Formula E?
Wow. Oh, who wants to start?
Well, I think Hazel should probably start, because I think the first initial seed that became Inside Electric was her brainchild back in, I can't even remember when it was last season, one race.
Yeah, it was sort of like the start of season 5, so like whatever year that was, 2018.
Yeah, 18.
Yeah, so it was actually when we went to Riyadh the first time. I couldn't get anywhere to take my coverage from Riyadh because of the controversies around Saudi Arabia. And I was really frustrated by that, partly because I wanted to write about the controversies. I wasn't intending to sort of be a coward about it, or to dissemble, partly because there seemed to be not no risk, but there was a relatively low risk for me, but also because like that's just the kind of thing I write. And I started thinking about it, and I was like, I want a Formula E publication that isn't, a lot of Formula E coverage is like Formula One, but not as much. And it tries to fit a Formula One mold onto Formula E coverage, which, to be honest, doesn't really work because they're very different series with very different audiences. And stuff like the news cycle for Formula One, you can endlessly recycle stuff and still get clicks. But that doesn't mean that either A, it's particularly good as journalism, and B, that there's a similar audience for Formula E. There simply isn't. Like, people don't care that much about why someone in 17th place crashed out 3 laps into a race. Like, they just don't. So whereas people do care about the technologies, they do care about the genuine questions that they have. If you Google Formula E, it's all things like, do Formula E cars work in the rain? I mean, they do, but the fact that people are still asking that is something that's like, that was the kind of thing I wanted to address, and also have like a site that wasn't afraid to kind of like take on the bigger topics in motorsport that people are genuinely interested in, whether it's like, should BTS be involved with Formula E, or like, why aren't there enough LGBT athletes proportionally to how many there should be statistically in these kind of sports. And somehow I sort of like grumbled about it all season, and like I think I probably told these guys like several times that I had this idea, and then in New York it had kind of solidified into something I had a really strong idea about. So we went to a bar one night, and I think it was like the Thursday or Friday in New York, and like all good things in Formula E, I scrawled some like terrible plan on a napkin and made everyone sign it. And then we actually made a more sensible plan and built the website much later. But like that was the intention.
Yeah, I actually remember after New York, we kind of had been sort of throwing this idea around quite a bit, and then by the time we went to Valencia, we were pretty much set that we were going to do. And then in Valencia, we were kind of I remember we were kind of, because we mingle with a lot of other journalists, but we were sometimes, you know, we'll go to interviews, we'll go here with other journalists, but there was occasions where we'd scurry off for a little meeting, just us, and we were trying to find like a quiet place. We ended up just sitting in a staircase in the Valencia next to the media center, and yeah, we were trying to sort of get away from the other journalists, because we didn't, you know, we wanted to keep the secret of what we were doing. But after Valencia, the plan started to really come together then, and we had a very solid idea of what we wanted Inside Electric to be. And yeah, it's 6 months. It's actually six months the other day since we launched, actually. And yeah, it's gone pretty well, actually.
6 months. Wow.
Yeah.
You've done so much. It does feel like it's been much longer than 6 months. Take my word.
Thank you. But Rob, Hazel, Peter, and Rebecca, who are not obviously on this call, we started off as friends, obviously, as well as working in media centres and stuff together, which I think has been a real positive, because we're not afraid to say what we think and where we think the direction of the site should go. You know, we can be very open and honest with each other, and also we just enjoy having a laugh and doing all this together. I think one thing that quite a lot of people have said is that in our podcast and things like that, people can see that, you know, well, it's so kind. They say we know what we're talking about, which is always reassuring. But they also say that, you know, they can see there's a real good friendship that we've got here, and we can bounce off each other and have banter and things like that, which I'll be honest, I don't think many outlets have. For quite a lot of outlets, I think they're quite not dull, that's probably the wrong word for it, but they're very strict and they follow a very certain guidelines, I think. And, you know, at Inside Electric, we're just here to be as passionate with the fans and the people that watch it than we are, if that makes sense.
I think also as well, one thing which has worked really well is because we kind of all, well, I'd like to think that we trust each other. We all have a reasonably equal input into sort of the big decisions. Like, there are some aspects of what we do and what we create where maybe I have more involvement in say the podcast, or Hazel has more involvement in the video stuff, and there's other things that other people are more involved in. But collectively, we all have input into ideas, and we all are equally able to come up with a new idea or veto an idea that someone has, which we might not feel is right. And I think so far we haven't fallen out, and I don't think we have. And
say no.
So yeah, that's worked quite well.
For the three of you, just a little experiment, because I'm aware that some people following my page might come from MotoGP, and they're very, very, very familiar with Formula E. So how would you explain, in essence, going back to the basics, what is Formula E? How does Formula E car operate? And how much things have changed since the introduction of the Gen 2 car?
Katie, do you want to take what is Formula E?
Formula E in 3 bullet points by Inside Electric.
And then I'll do how does the car work, and you can do how it's changed, Rob.
Oh, okay. Well, Formula E is an all-electric motorsport series. There are 24 drivers on the grid, 12 teams. There's a huge rush of manufacturers that have recently come to the championship, including the likes of BMW, Audi, Porsche, and Mercedes. You know, it's one of the only championships that's ever existed that's had those top 4 German manufacturers in it. So, we race on street circuits, as Alexander Sims mentioned earlier, and it's really good. And if you don't watch it, then you're missing out.
I can vouch for that. Next.
So the way the car works is that it's not about the most expensive technology that you can use in the same way that Formula One is. It's about using technology that's actually quite heavily price limited to something that plausibly could transition to a road car. And from the roots of the series, a lot of it has been about cost control and about limiting the types of technologies that are used. Not because the idea is to hold the technologies back, but because the idea is to develop on a platform that could transition to use in actual road cars. So the original Formula E battery was 24 kilowatt hours, which was about the same as a Nissan Leaf at the time. The Gen 2 battery is 52 kilowatt hours, and that's about the same as a modern Nissan Leaf. So, which is the best-selling electric road car. So it's developing on a platform for a reasonable price and for direct transfer technologies. Otherwise, the cars work like anything electric. They have a motor generator unit. They have regenerative braking, so power goes from the battery to the drivetrain to make the car go. They don't need to be geared. Some of them do have gearboxes, but they don't need to be geared. It depends how the powertrain's set up. Because every manufacturer brings their own powertrain now. And then under regenerative braking, the power can also reverse into the battery. I mean, that's actually an incredibly crude way of saying it, but basically the motor generator unit is both a motor and a generator. A lot of the steps forward that Formula E had made have been around regen. Regenerative or the maximum that you can regenerate now is 100 kilowatts in excess of how much you could output in the first season. So it used to be that the race limit was 150 kilowatts for what you could use to drive the car, and now it's 250 kilowatts for what you can shove back into the battery, which is hugely important to improving the efficiencies of electric cars overall and improving the way that you can manage battery temperatures and the way that you can put cars under stress. So from a technological perspective, it's using basically the same technology as most cars. Electric motors are already very efficient. They don't need to be pushed that much harder in the same way that combustion technology does with very fancy things. It's more about working out exactly how you can make that work and make it really efficient and make it able to recycle the energy and to go further and harder and all of the things that we look for in racing.
And Rob, how things have changed since the introduction of the Gen 2 car? You're muted.
Sorry. I think Formula E has changed massively over the last few years. I think if you go back to the early seasons, there was still I feel, well, some of the championships critics might have said that it was a bit of a gimmick, and there might still be some that say that. But I think on a global level, Formula E is taken a lot more seriously now. The grid in terms of drivers is probably one of the strongest in motorsport now. As Katie mentioned there, we've got the 4 big German manufacturers. We've got Nissan, we've got Jaguar, we've got DS. It's a seriously strong field, but also Gen 2 car now is a lot faster. It has longer battery life now. It's super cool to look at. It's the sort of car that kids will want to have posters of on their bedroom. And I think Formula E has really earned global respect now as a series. A lot of drivers want to get a seat. Teams have actively left other championships to join it. And it's big business now. And I think the future for Formula E is really exciting. And it's frustrating that obviously everything that's going on in the world now has prevented things and put all of racing to a halt. But what we can look forward to in the future is next year Formula E is going to become an official FIA World Championship for the first time. So I would say if anyone is new to Formula E and hasn't really got stuck in, go back and listen to our podcasts on the best races you should watch, and then go on YouTube and listen to our advice and get stuck into the video archive, because it is absolutely fantastic championship with some great racing.
I think you could edit the last 3 questions as a standalone video. Formula E, 3 key points by the Inside Electric team. Rob, there's something that you said that is very significant, which shows how the huge popularity of Formula E nowadays, which is, I think, as you mentioned, when Formula E started, it was like a backup plan for drivers. So drivers who hadn't been able to race anywhere else could come to Formula E. It was a backup plan. But now I think we have young drivers for which Formula E is the main plan, is the aspiration, is where they want to be. It's no longer a backup plan because I couldn't find anywhere else.
Yeah, I would say if you look back on the first season, with the greatest respect to every driver on that grid, there were
absolutely
that were past their best. Let's say that. But now we've got
past their best, or they hadn't been able to find an opportunity elsewhere.
Well, both. Maybe they'd kind of be left with no other choice to try Formula E, or maybe they perhaps never had the ability to reach the high levels that perhaps they were aiming for. And yeah, like you say, it was a backup plan. But now, in the last few years, we've had young guys like Max Günther, Alexander Sims' teammate, Mitch Evans come into the series. Really exciting young talent who now look at Formula E as a career prospect rather than, like you say, a backup plan. And yeah, I think the grid is one of the strongest in motorsport, and every driver on that grid has won races or a championship in another category. There's no one on that grid that I would honestly say is kind of just picking up a check. So it's a very, very strong championship.
My last question for the 3 of you, because I'm conscious of time. Before everything has stopped because of the COVID-19 crisis, Formula E had undertaken 5 races of season 6. Katie, as you wrote in a story for Inside Electric, for the season to count as an official championship, there need to be a minimum of 6 official events. So where does the current situation leave Formula E? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, like you say, we need to host 2 more events, so that's 2 more races. Unfortunately, they can't be back-to-back races. We've seen it before in Formula E that there'll be a race on the Saturday and then a race on the Sunday. Unfortunately, that concept won't work with how we need to finish the championship. So at the moment, my understanding is that a lot of the Formula E stuff is currently in Valencia. That's where it was shipped to after we did the race in Marrakesh. So we could look at Valencia as a potential circuit. I don't think at the moment, especially with the government announcement today with the quarantining in the UK, that we will have a race in the UK, unfortunately. But other places in Europe look like potential options for us. I do believe I'm slightly more optimistic now that we will finish the calendar or the season even. But unfortunately, nobody can predict what's going to happen, in the next few months, not even tomorrow. So we'll have to see. But at the moment, I remain slightly optimistic that we will get the season wrapped up.
Hazel, Katie, Rob, I had many more questions for you, but we are running out of time. So what about doing this again? What about having another electric night this summer?
Yeah, no, that would be great. It'd be great fun.
Yeah, that sounds excellent.
Okay. You can't say no now. You said yes.
No, it'd be great fun. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you very much for joining me. And to everyone watching, thank you very much for being with us tonight. And if you don't want to miss out on my next interview or on our next electric night, make sure you like my Facebook page, Marieta Evans Interviews, or subscribe to my channel and check Inside Electric website and follow them on Twitter as well. Thank you very much and have electrifying dreams.